Hello, everybody. Recording live from somewhere. This is Zach Couples with episode number 20 of the movement Debrief. And today, I haven't really seen many patients because I just started work today because I was on vacation. But we're going to talk about jobs, something I've been meaning to discuss because I had a good question from someone about jobs. So that's what it's going to be about today. Hopefully applicable to a lot of people who even aren't in my field. But before we do that, some housekeeping. Did you guys see my blog this week? So this week I discussed, I didn't discuss anything. I showed my monthly links and my reviews about some of the things that I was learning about this past month. A lot of good things, a lot of good productivity things. I mean, that was just, yeah. And I got a ways to go. Don't get it twisted, because I want to keep putting out much more content and getting some stuff done. But check out the links. It's really good stuff. I came across a lot of good material this month. And if you want to get those links ahead of time, please subscribe to my newsletter on zachcouples.com. Otherwise, housekeeping. That's really all that's going on the website front. Otherwise, I was this past week I was on vacation, and I went to Yosemite, Sequoia, and Kings Canyon National Parks, and wow, friggin' phenomenal places. Love being outdoors. If you guys haven't been to those, Zachary. Man, I'm super stoked to have you here, fam. Thanks for tuning in. But I went to those national parks. If you haven't gone to them, go like yesterday. I mean, they're all friggin' awesome. Yosemite was spectacular, and just lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of good stuff there. And I also got to go to a Con Ed class put on by my boys at Resilient Physical Therapy and Performance Physical Therapy. I forget what they call themselves, but really good class, guys. You should really check them out. Obviously, I'm biased because Douglas is my older brother. Figure that one out. And Trevor Rappa is my son. Yep, you can see the resemblance based on the hair. And Greg Spatz is my stepson. So I have much love for those guys. But they do great work. They put on a great class, and I learned a lot from them. So you guys should check them out at Resilient Performance PT or resilientpt.com, I think it's called. I'll put the link up in the show notes. Doesn't matter. But that was like my last week, so I haven't been in the clinic much, except for today. So with that in mind, let's debrief, shall we? And we're going to debrief today on all about jobs. So this was a question posed by Rhinoceros Rex, who's just been killing it with good questions. And he asked this question, Champ, I see you, Champ. So Rhinoceros Rex asked this question when I was talking about, it was one of the past debriefs, but it was something job related, and I can't remember what it was. And he's like, I was about like getting your dream job or something like that, where I was talking about like the interview process, right? And he said, what other tips would you have to get your dream job? And so I was kind of thinking about that, and it kind of inspired me to reflect a little bit and lay out some of the things that I've had success and failures with the entire continuum of getting a job. Now, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but I'm whatever, champ. So I've had experience, obviously getting jobs, and I've gotten some pretty cool jobs in my day. But I've also, I don't talk on the internet about the jobs I haven't gotten, because for all the great jobs that I've had access to, I've had that many more that I didn't have access to because of maybe some errors I made in the interview or what have you. So I've seen it on both sides of the equation. Respect, champ. I've seen both sides of the coin. So I'm hoping that I can help you guys with some of the areas that I failed with, some of the areas that I've done some learning on to help myself get better at the whole job process, and we'll go from there. So, step one, first thing I want to talk about, before you even are searching for a job, you got to think about what's important to you, what you prioritize, and what you want. Because that's going to stratify your search to the nth degree. And so what kind of things do you value, not just in a job, but in life? So how much do you value your free time? That's an example. Do you have student loan debt or other debt? Do you have a family? All of these things matter when it comes to searching for a job and determining what kind of job you want. And I'll talk you kind of through my thought process for me personally. Because obviously I took this job with Memphis before. You can't see my shirt on Facebook, but Memphis. I was with the Grizzlies before I started traveling. And I just kind of thinking about my thought process back then at the time was, why would what kind of things would gravitate me towards a job like that or wanting a job like that? And for me, it's like, what do I prioritize in a job? Well, first off, I'm unattached. I don't have any kids, no girlfriend or anything like that. So it's like I'm mobile. I don't really have an affinity for a place to live. At least I haven't found a place that I have to stay here. So I'm not tied down by a house or anything like that. And so I look and see okay, what things are important to me in this job? Well, I love my work. That's pretty much all I've been doing. I've been spending a lot of time reading, learning, and I love working with athletes. And this was the first opportunity that I had to do that. And let's not get it twisted, guys. Ego definitely plays a role in that as well. So, it's oh, I got to work in the NBA, so that's a big stroke of the ego, right? And so it's you get all these factors that go into taking a job such as that, or at least going after a job such as that. Now, on the flip side of that, after being let go, and being a little older and thinking things through, it's well, what things weren't so good about that job that now with the current job that I have are good? Well, one, I didn't have hardly any free time. And so it's while I get to satisfy all of these things, free time is gone. That hiking trip that I just went on, that would never happen when I was in the league. And so there's that. From the amount of hours that I worked versus the amount of money I made, it really wasn't a good investment in that regard, compared to what I'm doing as a traveling physical therapist, where I'm working much fewer hours but making much more money. So you kind of have to consider these things in terms of what's important to you. And so for me right now, things that I think about when I'm trying to get a job is, okay, what's it pay? Because I have a lot of student loans and I want to get rid of those, right? Because that opens up so many more opportunities. After having worked 60, 80-hour weeks for a fairly long period of time being in the league, it's what else is important is having more time. So it's what kind of job can I do that makes a decent amount of money, doesn't require a lot of time work-wise, and allows me a bit more freedom, while at the same time putting me in a position to succeed working with patients. And this job fulfills all of those criteria. I get paid well. I don't have to work that many hours. I get one-on-one time with my patients for 45 minutes, and I have a lot of free time. So it's now that I know what the criteria are that I look for in a job and what's important to me, I can go ahead and make my job selection or job search criteria much smaller and more focused, as opposed to just throwing your resume in the wind and seeing what happens. Now, would I still take a job in sports? Yeah, probably. Just because I really enjoyed the work, and I feel in an arena like that, you have many more ways to intervene with someone than say you would maybe, because I work with a lot of access patients, which is Medicaid in Arizona. It's there's things I can't do with them. I can't I can't do extravagant nutritional interventions with them. Sleep might be kind of tough because maybe they have a bazillion kids. I don't know. I mean, it's just like there's more barriers, right? When you're working in insurance-based physical therapy and you don't have as much time. So know what you want in a job so it streamlines your search. That would be the biggest thing. So determine what your priorities are and then find the job that satisfies those priorities or works with those priorities. The second thing, the job search. I can tell you what doesn't really work well, and that would be the Monsters of the world, the Indeeds, definitely not the Teamwork Online, where you are up against a lot of people, because everyone uses these things, or Glassdoor. Everyone uses these things for their job search, and if everyone's there, then you have that many more people that you have to compete against. I think that at least I haven't had much success spending time in those arenas, especially considering that a lot of these are very formulaic in terms of you got to fill out this, cover letter, blah, 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 blah. It's not, to me, it's an inefficient way to go about searching for a job. So I try to avoid those at all costs. Things that I do like better, connecting with a person. That's probably the most impactful thing that you can do. So, for example, most of the jobs that I've gotten are because someone who I know knows someone else and they put us in touch, right? And so having that extravagant network is incredibly helpful. And even not if you don't have a network, being able to, like in the travel positions that I'm at, recruiters come to you all the time. So you're still interacting with a person not face to face, but there's one less hurdle to get over with, whereas like with some of these sites, it's not necessarily direct communication. But even the recruiters that I worked with, those were made based on a mutual connection that we had. Two of my very good friends were travelers, and they put me in touch with my recruiter, who then is now like big time in her job, and now I have someone else who's just as good. So you got to interact with people. You got to connect with people. That's the biggest thing I would say that you need in order to find the dream job or have access to potential dream jobs. Because if you got good friends and you got a wide network, they're going to have an idea in terms of what you're going to be good at and what not. So you're going to be exposed to jobs that you could potentially be successful at. Whereas if you're using a Glassdoor or something like that, chances are much slimmer. The other thing I would say, as you're conducting your job search, and in order to have access to some of these jobs, would be make sure you're ready for the opportunity, whatever that is. So if the question I would ask myself is, have I maximized my skill set as best as I can to put me in a position to be even considered for a potential job? If I'm looking for a job or if I get into a position where I have a job that's a potentially PT and sports science mix, as an example. My sports science background's okay, but it's not like otherworldly. It's not like some of the cats who I worked with in Memphis, the Aussies. They know their shit. So depending on what that company values, that's going to put me at a disadvantage, even if the opportunity's there. I may not have the preparation for it. Whereas an outpatient orthopedics job in Page, Arizona, with some of the experiences that I've had, yeah, I'm overly prepared for that kind of job. And that's probably a contributing factor as to why I got it. So think about the jobs that you guys want and whatever your dream job is. And ask yourself, look back at you and say, do I possess the skill set necessary to be successful at that level? Or do I possess the skill sets necessary that someone may think of, hey, this guy or gal might be perfect for that opportunity, and put you in that position to be able to potentially get that job? are you going to be ready when the opportunity knocks? That's the question you have to ask yourself. And if you don't have that skill set, figure out a way to get that skill set, whether it's going to continuing education, doing some reading, doing some writing, showing that, oh, you have some success here, or volunteering. One of my buddies who he does pretty well getting jobs, but he's like doing volunteering in some of the areas that he doesn't have as much experience for. I mean, you'd be amazed at what kind of things that can do for your resume. These are all things to consider when you're trying to search for the dream job. So, in terms of the search, reach out to your network first and foremost. Build the network if you don't have it, and make sure you have the skills necessary to prepare you for your dream job when that opportunity, if and when that opportunity, I should say, comes along. So that's the search side of things. So once you got your search underway, you figured out what kind of job you're looking for, and maybe you got a potential offers coming your way. The next step would be the interview process. And a lot of the job search is kind of like the dating scene, right? The interview process is kind of like that first date where you're trying to get a feel for each other. You're trying to see if this is going to work versus not. And when you are going to interview for someone, the last thing you want to do is make it about you. Think about those dates you've been on with someone and all they did was talk. Sometimes, because I'm sick in that regard, if I'm on a potential date, I just will continue to ask questions over and over and over again and see if they ask back. And you'd be amazed at how often that doesn't happen. And I don't blame people for this, because everyone wants to talk about themselves. Like that's one of those things that all of us, and myself included, get gratification from. And that exact same process is something we want to apply to interviews. So what you have to consider going into the interview is, what does this company need? Where do they suck at or aren't good at? Or aren't good, suck. What do they need? Where are they struggling? And how can you help them in those two areas? And so a lot of successful interviewing capability, or to be good at interviewing, you got to do your homework. So before I go into an interview, I research everything I possibly can about the company. I research all that I can about the interviewers, because then that might give us some talking points going forward. I just research as much as I can. And with interviews, there's oftentimes common questions that are asked. You have to prepare for those. And so I will have answers prepared ahead of time. So then when the tough questions come, such as the where will you be in 5 years, or if you discuss a time where you failed, or discuss a time in which you didn't, you had a clashing with a coworker, how did you handle that, or a conflict or something like that. Those are questions you have to be prepared for in advance. And so the better prepared you can get in and understand what your date wants and needs, the more likely you are to be successful. With that in mind, as you are talking in the interview, your goal is to not have it be an interview. So what do I mean by that? Well, you want to get, instead of it being an interview, being a conversation. More importantly, a conversation about them. Some of the best interviews that I've had were just pretty much us talking shop, or me just asking them a bunch of questions. And they didn't really have to ask much about me. And, afterwards, a lot of positive vibes, and in many cases, jobs. And the reason why that is because when you get them talking about themselves, one, it gives you a lot of information about what type of company you are going to potentially be working for. Two, it'll help you problem solve what they need. And three, you got to remember, everyone likes to talk about themselves. So the more that you can get that being a dialogue, and even to some extent like a monologue on their part, the better off you're going to be. So you want to transcend the interview into a conversation if at all possible. Now, another thing to think about in terms of like maybe some common questions that are asked in an interview is to, instead of, again, saying, I did this, this, and this, reframing it on how you can help them. And so one thing that I've tweaked lately for my interview process compared to what I used to do was always target it back to how my skill set will help them. And I'll give you an example. So a common question in an interview that you are asked is, tell us about yourself. Or why don't you talk to us about your resume? And with that, what do most people do? Well, I graduated PT school in 2011 and I did this, this, and this, and I enjoy long walks on the beach, reading books, and a good Pinot Noir at night, right? You don't want to do that at all, because this question is really not about you and tell us about yourself. The question is, how can you help us? And so instead of having that talk, which I've done multiple times to great failure, is now I summarize what my resume is like, and I make sure to tie it again to them. And so, for example, let's say Joe Bag of Donuts, who's offering me this job or who's interviewing me, says, hey, tell us about yourself, Zach. I might say something like, well, if you look at my resume, you can see 3 common themes. One is I've had a breadth of experience in multiple areas. 2 is I have a passion and drive for skill sets of ABC, and that is shown by my success here in terms of I had 70% of people be pain-free. I don't know, whatever. It doesn't have to be that. But it's like you summarize your resume and who you are in points that are relevant to the job at hand, because they're going to say, oh, okay, I can see how these experiences are going to be beneficial for us as a company. So that would be the interview process for the most part. Lastly, regarding that is once the interview is kind of done and they say, do you have any questions? Make sure you ask questions. And the questions that I would do would be things that are targeted towards what your wants are, because it's not just about what they want, right? You have to make sure that whatever your priorities are, that the company is going to help you match those priorities. So I would ask questions geared towards that, or maybe gaps in terms of, how things run or what have you, that maybe you couldn't find out via the research process. So those would be some of the key things to think about with an interview. One last thing, if you've really done your homework, and I really like this concept from Ramit Sethi, and I can link this in the show notes, but he does this thing called the briefcase technique. And you really got to do your homework to have this be pulled off. But basically what that entails is before you leave, you give them a sheet or a paragraph or a couple pages, whatever, of some initiatives that if you are put into a position, you would do. And ideally, these initiatives would help solve problems that they have. For example, with some of the positions that I've interviewed for, I've given people lists of like, here are my outcomes for this. And then, look, you have a problem with injury A, B, and C. Well, look, here's how I would go about helping you in that regard. And here's the time frame it would take to implement that. Or, hey, you have an issue with nutrition. Well, these are some initiatives that I think we can employ, and we're going to do it in this time frame. Those would be a couple examples of what you would do with the briefcase technique. But essentially what you're giving them is a menu of things to choose from, saying like, okay, yeah, these are all things we've had problems with. We should probably hire this person because they can solve a lot of our problems. Something to consider. Well, I think it's more impactful if you do that within the interview itself. Even doing that post-interview can be incredibly impactful because you might be, you might see problems that you may not have seen through just your initial search. So, big keys with the interview, to summarize that point, is make it about them. Tailor your interview so you are helping them with the problems that they have. Consider that your priorities are still important and make sure that you use the interview process to figure out if this job will meet your priorities, and then use the briefcase technique. That's how you can ace interviews. Okay? Let's say you finish your interview and you want to know what the next step is, because your work is not done, my friends. The next step, send thank you notes. Handwritten, ideally. I use, I wish I had the paper nearby, but I basically have like this fancy paper that I will write handwritten thank you notes on them, and I try to make them as specific as possible because I am grateful for these individuals taking times out of their busy work schedules to have a conversation with me, even if it doesn't work out. It's like you have to be grateful that you are even in the position to have that conversation for your potential dream job. So send thank you notes. Even send thank you notes to people maybe who just helped showed you around where you need to be. I mean, send as many as you can. You want to continue to leave a positive vibe about the company, and they will remember you for that. They will. Even if it's not for this job, they'll remember you in the future. So send your thank you notes. Don't be afraid to follow up. You don't want to be clingy, right? Saying, asking every other day, hey, you hear anything yet from this job? But there's nothing wrong with asking bi-weekly, just so you kind of get a feel for where things are at in the process. Those are also things to consider post-interview. The other thing I would say is make sure you keep trucking along with what you're doing. Because a lot of times the trap that I fall into, because I am a ruminator on things, is I will continuously think about, oh man, I wonder if I'm going to get this, or I wonder if there's anything else I can do to get that job. It's like you can't let this interview process get in the way of things that are right in front of you right now. Bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. So if you are at a job right now, or you got things going on online, or you got a family, it's like you got to spend time and focus on that stuff. You can't let that slide because you're playing a waiting game. So those would be some of the post-interview things that I would consider. Let's say you get the job and it's negotiating time. What do? First off, never, I'm saying this because I've done it way too many times, but I haven't lately, never, ever, ever be satisfied with the first offer. Because if you're satisfied with the first offer, chances are they lowballed you for the most part, and you can probably get more out of them. And I think what's changed my mind in this regard is I think before, when I was applying for jobs, and that's just not just this like the Memphis job, for example, but jobs in the past, is you're like, oh, well, who am I? I got this job offer. I guess that's just what it is, and you feel like you have something to lose. But now, I could give two shits, right? Because I got nothing to lose, and that's the frame of mind that I go with anytime I am getting a job offer. Because what's the worst that can happen? Someone else gets the job, and as the old saying goes, opportunities are like buses. The next one will come around eventually. Doesn't mean you can't get a good opportunity later on. So be fearless. Be fearless. Don't make decisions or don't take a job that doesn't match your priorities. Because guess what? Even if you think it's the dream job, by month 3, you're going to be miserable. And you're going to be wishing that, oh man, I wish I wouldn't have done this. Because I've been there. You don't want to do it. Make sure that you don't give up the things that you find important when you're taking a job. Don't do it. So there's that. In terms of salary negotiations and stuff like that, there's a few techniques that I found to be pretty helpful. First offer, you can go about this one of 2 ways. And I go about it this way. I generally kind of bulk at the first offer. And so what do I mean by that? Let's say someone offers me, I don't know, $80,000 or something like that. And yeah, I was hoping to get 100, right? They might say, hey, here's what we're offering you from a salary wise. And I'll go, 80,000. And after I say that, I'll say, look, that's a little bit out of what I was thinking. Is that the best you can do? And then shut up. Because silence is awkward. They want to fill in the gaps. You don't even have to throw out a counteroffer. Because a lot of times they're going to make some type of change to help break the silence. Or they're going to ask you a question. But you want them to go first. You want to put them on the initiative in terms of making an offer. You never want to give them a number until you absolutely have to. If you don't feel like being that ballsy, which it works, guys, it really does. Not just in salary negotiations, but all types of negotiations. In fact, I used that very technique to negotiate a pretty sweet hotel room this past week. If you don't feel like doing that, another thing you could say, and I'm trying to think if this is also Ramit. Because a lot of this stuff, I mean, like, guys, check out Ramit Sethi. I'll link him in the show notes, but he's been very impactful in this regard. But another thing you might say is, look, that's a good starting number. Let's discuss further the whole package and stuff like that and see if we can find a common ground that's going to help us both out. That's another way you can go about it. You don't have to give a number yet. Right? So just try those things to start, see what happens, and you might get a few extra nickels just by doing that alone. All right? The other thing you can do is if you have a number in mind, and we'll use let's say you got offered 80 and you were shooting for 100K as an example. What you may do is what's called a bracketing technique. And a lot of this is from a book that I'm reading on negotiation. I'll link that in the show notes. But for example, if they're at 80 and you want 100, you might start at 120, and then you guys just talk back and forth until you get closer and closer to the 100. And so what does that look like in practice? Well, maybe you're going to say, oh, really? You say 75,000 or 80,000. And you do the silence, and then they might say, well, what kind of number, what were you thinking? And you might say, well, based on this, this, and this, I was thinking that I could only do this for 120,000. And maybe you give them a little bit of rationale in terms of why that is. Now, they might balk at that, but chances are if you're throwing a number up that's a decent amount higher than what they initially offered, and they want you, they're going to do something to come up to you, right? Assuming you ace the interview with some of the stuff that I talked about before. And maybe it's not salary, but maybe it's something with benefits, or maybe it's more vacation time or whatever. It's like, take all of these things into account. But something's going to change if you killed the interview. So these are things to think about, right? You can bracket, you can balk, you can do all these types of things. One of the probably most impactful things you can do to help either with raises or getting a better offer is having competition. So if I'm ever interviewing for a position, I'm interviewing in multiple spots because I want many numbers to throw at them. Because if you can say, oh, really? Well, I'm looking at this offer and this offer too, and they're offering this, you can kind of play all these guys against each other, right? And see who's going to give you the best offer. This is something that I did with my travel gig, and I was able to get a considerable raise because I had other people or other positions that I could have potentially taken that provided competitive salaries. And that was incredibly effective because I was able to get a number that I wanted. So when you are negotiating bulk, or say this is a starting point, first, you can think about bracketing, and then lastly, use competition. Those factors will do wonders at not just getting you your dream job, but at a pay, salary, or package that you're worth. So don't be afraid to do that. And overarching all that, be fearless and act like you got nothing to lose. Because I'll tell you what, guys, you do have nothing to lose. Other opportunities will come along if you don't get this one. All right, so that's the negotiation side of things. Let's say you got the job. Now what? Your life's done, right? You can just chill and relax. Wrong, because you've just begun. You got to kill this job. And how do you kill jobs? Glad you asked. First and foremost, a mistake that I've made many times, be a team player and don't have an ego. Because while egos can ascend you to a high level, you can also burn a lot of bridges. And I've done that many times. And it was, I think, I don't want to say that I have any regrets, right? Because these are still learning opportunities for me. But squashing that ego will make you have better connections, which could potentially lead you to even better jobs and what you think is your dream job. It's going to make the workflow much smoother. And it's going to be better for you in the long haul because guess what? You might not know everything. You might not be that important, even if you aced the interview and they gave you something good. Maybe they put you in a good position. But it takes a team to be successful in most jobs. Be a team player, squash the ego, and who knows, if you don't have an ego and someone presents a solution that maybe you didn't think of, you got better because of it. So squash that first. Also, do your job and do it savagely well. I mean, it doesn't sound like much, right? But how many times in all of our jobs have we gotten complacent, or we mailed it in, or we've slacked? You can't do that because it's bigger than you. When you are part of an organization or a corporation, it's not about you anymore. It's about the team. It's about the business. It's about all these things. And you have to do everything in your power to ensure that that business is successful. Because the more successful your business is, whether that's your own or whether that's a company you work for, the more successful you can be and the better situation you can be in. If it's not there, somewhere else. Because guess what? Your hard work is going to help them get better. And if, because of a lot of factors, the company doesn't get better, someone else is going to think, hey, that Dr. Jason Ross is a pretty hard-working cat. I want them on my team when I go to this job, right? So do a good job. Work hard. Don't mail it in. These things are incredibly important if you want to be successful at your job. And I think that's probably a good stopping point for tonight, unless anyone has any questions while I do my how can you learn more about me kind of thing. But that's kind of at least where my thought process is with jobs right now. I'm definitely not the foremost expert by any means, and I'm still learning a lot of this stuff, but it's something that I think we don't talk enough about, especially in my field of physical therapy. I think we're really good at advocating for the profession in certain aspects, and we're good at treatments and patient care and all these things. But I'll tell you one thing we suck at is the business and marketing side of things. And getting jobs is one of those pieces. Because the most important thing you can market is yourself. And if you use some of the tips that I presented tonight, it's going to help you in some way, shape, or form, whether it's getting that dream job or even creating your own dream job. So I hope you guys liked what I talked about tonight. Let's say you want to learn more. Where can you find me? I'm glad you asked. First off, go to zachcouples.com. That's where I put all the content. That's where this debrief will be tomorrow. And while you're there, go ahead and subscribe to my newsletter. You'll get some free stuff. You'll get a free acute to chronic workload calculator, a free basketball conditioning program. You'll get access to other exclusive content coming up that, I'll tell you what, if you are just looking at my site, you won't have access to. You can also, with that, get my weekend learning goodies every Friday. I give you some stuff that I read this week that I thought was dope as hell. You can check it out there. Also, while you're there, let's say you need a mentor or someone to bounce clinical ideas off of. I can be that guy. Check out the services page. I offer mentorships. I offer movement consultations. If you're a little tighter than you'd like to be, or maybe it hurts at the bottom of a squat and you've been to PT and it's not helping, go check that out. I offer movement consultations. Also, say you're post-rehab. Say you are trying to be an athlete of some sort or be better at your sport, maybe basketball, or maybe you want to dive into some fat loss. I can be your guy because I do online training, especially if you don't have access to a good trainer near you. Go check out the services page, subscribe to the newsletter, and read up, peeps, because I'm putting out a gang of content, fam. You can also find me on the Facebooks. That's you guys right there. Facebook.com/ZCouples. I'm also on Twitter. My handle is @ZCouples. And I'm also on that Instagram, baby. Slide into my DMs after you've signed up at Zach, ZAC Couples. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search Zach Couples. I think it's youtube.com/user/couples performance, but that's way too long. Just go to YouTube. Type Zach Couples and hit the subscribe button. I think that's the only way you can find me online. Otherwise, if you're in Page, Arizona, shit, hit me up, fam. We'll go hiking or something. Other than that, you guys keep it real, but not to the extent where things go wrong. Stay hungry, stay learning, stay moving, and I'll see you next time. Deuces.